Okay, we gotta get started.
Welcome to the Zonta Club of Santa Clarita Valley Life's Forward Workshop. You're the boss of your money. Make it work for you. Presented by Patty Handy, Wealth Advisor with Vance Wealth, and Sue Twiddell, Regional Vice President and Investment Advisor and Representative for Primerica Advisors. I am Beth Heiserman, President of the Zonta Club of the Santa Clarita Valley. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat. To make all of our guests comfortable today while we record this workshop, we have privacy settings. Feel free to click on Stop Video to disable your camera. This presentation will be recorded live on Facebook and be uploaded and available to view also on Instagram and our website. We are requesting that everyone remain muted. It will only record the host. And now I present Phyllis Walker, Chair of our Life Forward Committee.
So welcome everybody. It gives me great pleasure to provide this Life Forward virtual workshop. You're the boss of your money. Make it work for you. Now I would like to introduce our speakers, Patty Handy and Sue Twiddell, Zontion's Mary Knight.
Hi everyone. First of all, I want to make sure that everyone can hear us. Can you guys all nod or raise your hand or do something? Awesome. Perfect. All right. I needed to make sure of that first. So I'm Sue Twiddell, and then this is Patty Handy, and I'm going to let her start all of this.
Okay, well, welcome. We are happy to see you. Normally we do this obviously in person, and we miss your faces, but the virtual will be fun. We do normally some exercises and some fun things when we're in person, so we won't be doing that. So as I speak through some of this, make sure that when you go home, or well, you are home, make sure that after the meeting today, you do some of these exercises on your own. So again, I'm Patty Handy, Wealth Advisor with Vance Wealth, and let's dig in. So I'm going to start with the life planning piece. So we are talking about money today, of course, and some money tips and education. But I'd like to step back for a minute and talk about some, not just financial planning, but life planning. So what I mean by that is taking an inventory of where you're at today with your health, your spiritual health, your physical health, your home. Are you feeling good at work? If you're married and your family, what are those dynamics feels like today? So what we do normally in a live setting is I have you sort of step back, take a few minutes, document where you are today in those different areas of your life, and then where you want to see yourself in, say, 5 years. And it's important to kind of step back and do that, because that life planning piece is so important for the overall health and wealth of your well-being, not just the financial side, because we are, as humans, a holistic being, and it's important to really grasp that. So next slide, again, we talk about the financial health, emotional health, physical health, spiritual health, and mental health. And we all define success differently. My success, it may be different when I define my physical health than somebody else's. So again, take a few minutes after the workshop and make note of these different areas of your life, and then look at how you define success in that. What does that look like to you? Where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? And then break down what you have to do. Take little steps to determine what do you need to do to get to that place. So if you're looking to lose weight, okay, or gain weight, or you're looking to grow deeper in your spiritual, what has to happen? Do you need to start exercising, eating differently? Again, those little nuggets. It's not anything that we don't know. It's about taking action on those different pieces. Going to the next slide, please. Again, you create the life that you want by design or by default, and it's really up to you. And we spoke about 5 years, 10 years. Write it down. Be very specific. Address all those aspects of your life. What type of lifestyle do you want in the 5 to 10 years? What kind of difference do you want to make? And what sort of drives a lot of that is what's your why. A lot of times when we look at the reason why behind why we want something in particular, that emotional trigger is going to give us the leverage and the motivation to want to do it. So super important to understand your why. And again, when we do this in person, I have you go through this exercise. We spend some time, but the virtual love today is just do this after the course is over, and take some time to do that, because it's really important to have that foundation laid before you can sort of step forward into the next piece. So Sue is coming on, and she'll be talking about the investing. She'll be doing an introduction.
I will. So again, I'm Sue Twiddell. I'm with Primerica Advisors. And today, Patty, thank you. That was amazing on just the life goals and just starting and really understanding what your why is. So yes, everyone, please do what she said. But let's talk about money for just a minute here. So this part of the presentation is going to be into the money part. And so what I thought I'd do is just go over real quickly what we're going to cover. So we're going to cover budgeting basics, debt is normal, no credit or no credit, investing, the name of the game. So let's get started on budgeting basics. Patty and I talked about it, and we thought it'd be kind of fun to introduce all of you to something called 2 Cents. It is a PBS program. It's little clips. It's about 6 minutes or so each, 5-6 minutes. And they have it on a variety of different subjects. There's on budget, there's debt, there's credit, there's investing. And they do it in such a way that we thought was kind of fun. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to play this little snippet on how to survive unemployment. And I'm going to move to the side here so you can actually see it. COVID style. So this isn't really about unemployment. And by the way, Melissa's actually getting the video up. The beta, which is what we're using on Zoom, doesn't allow you to do 2 things at once. But this particular video that we're putting up doesn't necessarily have to do unemployment. It has a little bit more to do with just COVID in general, and how can we get back to where we need to be on that. So I know Melissa's trying to put that back to the beginning real quick here. And we'll get that started for you. Take notes. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's day 25 of quarantining in our house. Like you, we're binge watching Tiger King, stress baking, and less fun, experiencing a reduction in our income.
We realize we're in an incredibly fortunate position, being able to ride it out without making significant sacrifices, but that is not the case for most. As we've mentioned before, 40% of Americans can't pay for a $400 emergency without credit. Even if you're not facing a corona-induced cash crisis yet, that doesn't mean you're out of the woods. The economic fallout from this disaster is going to have an effect on your life, no matter what industry you're in.
Unfortunately, like this virus, anxiety is also contagious, so it's only natural that a lot of us are asking ourselves the same question. How do I survive a financial storm?
Your first step needs to be to create an emergency budget. Yep, if you haven't yet climbed on board the 2 Cents budget train, 2020 is the perfect time to start. First rule of emergency budgeting is it must be written or typed out, not in your head. So find a spreadsheet or sign up for a budgeting software. Some are completely free. Second step is to gather data from the past. That way you're working with real numbers and not the amount you think you spend. Start by looking at the last 2 months worth of transactions and make a list of everything you spend money on. This might take a little time, but hey, for a lot of us, time seems more plentiful than ever.
Start by grouping the essential expenses at the top: housing, utilities, basic groceries, transportation, and medical needs. Second, list debt payments like student loans or credit card minimums. Finally, list all of your discretionary expenses like entertainment, meal delivery, and subscriptions.
What you're looking at is your pre-crisis budget. Now it's time to use that data to draft your emergency budget. Your first draft should take on a scorched earth feel by cutting everything below your minimum debt payments. Spotify, Wine, Postmates, even Netflix. Feels pretty bleak, right? Don't worry, we're not done.
Now it's time to create a second draft where you strategically pick discretionary items to add back in. This might just be one thing like Netflix, Or if your income took a less drastic hit, you can add back 3 or 4 things. It might come as a surprise, but holding on to a couple tiny splurge items might actually help you more in the long run than cutting them completely. One survey showed over half of Americans owned up to impulsively shopping as a result of feelings of anxiety, stress, and depression. And 83% of those stress spenders regret those purchases later.
For example, I find a lot of relief in being able to play a few online games, so I'd rather maintain access to that outlet and cut out ordering in because I find cooking less stressful. You might have a different preference. The point is that you need to give the pressure cooker a small but intentional release. That way, you're less likely to make a massive impulse buy later.
Now that most of your discretionary spending is paused, it's time to try and slim down the expenses that make up the majority of your needs, your essentials. And with almost 7 million applying for unemployment just last week, lenders and utility companies are being especially lenient.
If you own a home with a mortgage and have had your income go down, reach out to your mortgage company immediately to discuss options. The 2 mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are rolling out relief measures to help millions of homeowners defer or rework their loan payments. Even institutions like Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo are all coming out with their own offerings. And while landlords are less regulated than mortgage lenders, they also might be able to extend you more time or even be a little more flexible on terms. But again, you need to ask.
Your next round of calls should be to your utility companies and insurance providers. Many are offering to give their customers leeway to skip or delay payments. As you work your way down your list of bills, you'll finally get to your minimum loan payments. Thankfully, all federal student loan payments have been suspended by the recent stimulus bill until September 30th. And even private lenders are offering forbearance programs. You should also reach out to your credit card companies and any other lenders on your list. They're all joining the less people can pay us party.
The one thing that most of these forms of relief have in common is that benefits are not automatic. You have to reach out and ask them for help. Proactivity is the name of the game. And even if they don't let you skip a payment, they might have the power to not let it affect your credit score. That alone would be worth the call.
And if you already have cash set aside or are expecting some in the form of, say, a stimulus check from Uncle Sam, you should keep that on hand to cover your expenses your income can't. While it might be tempting to pay off debt or even invest with a recent stock market drop, cash is king in a crisis. Even if your income is only somewhat hit, its best use is to plump up that emergency fund a bit more, just in case Murphy's Law decides to show up.
And even with flexible payments and forbearance plans coming online, we see many folks considering extreme measures, like taking on 5 figures of credit card debt, yanking from retirement, or even ignoring bills entirely. Is there a time and a place to take these drastic steps?
Maybe, but they should be an absolute last resort. We definitely don't recommend taking out credit cards or loans if you have cash you can access. That's exactly what it's for. You truly need to be living the scorched earth lifestyle in earnest before resorting to those tools. And if you're in survival mode and debt is not an option, prioritize paying for your basic food, utilities, and transportation you'd need to keep yourself employable. If you still have leftover funds, move on to your housing costs and minimum debt payments. The main reason putting your utilities before your housing costs makes sense is that the consequences set in more quickly than skipping a housing payment.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's an especially scary time, but it doesn't have to be an unmitigated disaster. Don't allow panic or shame to take complete control. You have the power to make a plan and reach out for help. And that's our 2 cents.
Thanks to our patron.
Okay, I'm hoping you can all hear me again now. Melissa's getting that back over here, but while she is, let me just kind of go over a couple things with you on that. I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, there's a couple of things on it that were a little bit dated because it was done more in March or April of this last year instead of December, January. So a couple of those dates you'd have to check into student loan payments, things like that, just to make sure if there is still some deferrals on those. But let's get back into debt now, because we all know debt is normal, right? I mean, everybody has debt, so why not? If you think about it, the average credit card debt in the US is somewhere in and around $8,000 to $9,000 per family. And in California, well, this is California, and we know it's like 16,000 to 20,000 because we just have to be number one. But that's normal. It's normal for us to go ahead and charge things on credit cards, especially if we don't happen to have that cash. And it's normal to carry a balance. But how does that make you feel? Does it feel good? Probably not really. Can't really save. So let's ask ourselves some questions here. Do you, or do we, let's include all of us in this, do we use credit cards to pay our bills? Because if we do, that's probably something that we have to look at. What's happening? Why is it happening? So something we want to talk about. Are we carrying balances on our credit card, revolving debt month after month after month, and instead of it going down, it's actually going up? Do we miss, at least occasionally, miss a payment on a credit card or on our mortgage or on our phone bill or whatever? These are all things that we have to really take a look at and go, wait a second, these are signposts. This is going to help me figure out where I am, and now I can figure out what to do about it. And my last one down there, and you all see it on the screen, is do you feel like you're never getting out of debt? Does it make you feel kind of yucky and not real good, and just like a storm cloud is over the top of your head? Because if that's the case, you're living in what we call the debt cycle, where our finances are actually controlling us. So I have a question for you on that though. How would it feel if you had no debt, if you actually used your credit cards and were able to pay them off every month, if you could wake up in the morning and feel no burden like that? How would that make you feel? I'm hoping good. So, Melissa, go ahead. Sorry about that. I'm going to choke here for a second. All right. So let's talk about debt here, because we need to kind of figure out what debt is and kind of understand what we're doing here. I'm going to give you an example, and I love putting names to examples, so I'm going to use me, and I'm going to use Patty. And I use revolving debt. So I'm going to be that scenario right there on the top. I have $17,000 of debt, and I pay about $600 every month. And I know it's going to take me a while to get out of this debt. In fact, if I pay minimum payments, it's going to take me in and around 17 years, and I'm going to pay something like $12,000 of interest on a $17,000 debt. That's almost half interest. Well, Patty, on the other hand, obviously got smarter somewhere along the line, and she has the same amount of debt that I have, $17,000. Her payments are exactly the same, about $600 a month, but she's going to be out of that debt in 3 years, and she's only going to pay about $5,000 in interest. Well, what's the difference? Well, the thing is, there's two kinds of debt out there. There's something called revolving debt, and there's something called fixed debt. And in revolving debt, it compounds on itself every day. So every day that we don't pay it, the company looks at that and says, okay, well, let me add a little bit of interest onto that. And then tomorrow they'll do the same thing, and the next day the same thing, and the next day the same thing. And especially if I'm only paying minimum payments, I'm never getting out of that debt. Patty, on the other hand, did her research and said, well, wait a second here. If I have the choice, I'm going to use what is called fixed debt, which means it works by a schedule. In other words, you know what you owe at the beginning, you know what the payments are going to be, and you know how much it's going to take to get out of that debt. You know when you're going to be debt-free from it if you just follow the rules. Well, some interesting things come out upon this. Obviously, if we kind of break it down, that revolving debt, that's credit cards, it's store cards, it's that normal kind of debt that we can get fairly easily. Fixed debt, on the other hand, is your car payments, your mortgage payments, things like a second mortgage, that would even be a fixed debt. But if we went to a line of credit from your house, so an equity line of credit that we all have heard of, that's literally revolving debt. And they want you to do that. It sounds great. The interest rate sounds lower, but in the long run, you're paying back a lot more. So those are the two kinds of debt. And now that we understand that, now we can talk a little bit about how do we get out of this? How can we get out of the mess that we've already gotten into? And boy, I'll tell you, I was in that mess. It's been a few years now, but I had a lot of debts. And I used what you're seeing on the screen, and it's called debt stacking. There's a lot of different names for this. This one is called debt stacking for one reason and one reason only. The computer figured out what debt to pay off first. But some of you might have heard something called snowballing. And basically, all this is we're going to list down all of our debts, what the minimum payments are for each one of those, and then we're going to stick to those minimum payments until we get out of that debt. If we add any more money to it, we're literally going to add it to the top one. Now, if you look, if we were to just pay off those credit cards and do nothing more with it, the amount of time it would take us to get out of debt on that, and I can't really see it 100% on this because it's a little bit small.
23.
Yeah, it's about 23 years. But if as we get out of each debt, we take that one, if you look at that top one, and you can kind of see it, and I never know which way to point my finger here. That way. Okay, it's backwards for me. So anyway, that top debt where it says $200, we're going to pay that off, and once it's paid off, we're going to apply it to that second one. That second one, the new payment is now going to be $573. And we're going to keep doing that. If you look at the bottom, though, in the red, we never paid more debt than we started out with on this. Our monthly payments remain the same. But if we keep doing this, we're going to be out of debt, not in 23 years, but in, I believe it's 9 years. And some odd months there. And just simply start saving that money. And we did it. We actually invested it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. You actually could accumulate over $2 million just by doing this. Well, I got to tell you, when I first sat down with someone and I saw this for the very first time, I thought to myself, why hasn't anyone ever shown this to me? Literally, they were showing us how to get out of debt 14 years sooner than we thought, and literally have no interest at the end. I mean, everything paid off, house, everything. I don't know why no one shares that. Well, I do know why no one shares that with us. The credit card companies don't necessarily want us to know about that. The banks don't necessarily want us to know about it, but you now know one of the secrets and one of my favorite parts. All right, so now we're out of debt. What do? All right, well, now we can start saving. Now, I'm going to put a pin in that for just a second, because as much as I want to talk about saving and investing, there's another important part of this first, and that's credit. So I'm going to invite Patty back up here to talk about that.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Great job. Yeah, the credit cards, those can be daunting and haunting. So let's get into credit scores. Why is credit important? Credit it's like your report card to the world. It is it's the way that some employers will look at you, because some employers will pull your credit. Of course, when you buy a house, your interest rate will be based on your credit score, and the better your score, the lower the rate, which can mean thousands of dollars over time, tens of thousands of dollars over time potentially. Credit cards will pull your credit. Of course, that interest rate will vary as well. Your insurance company, if you own a home, your home insurance company will pull your credit. So there's so many. If you actually go to rent an apartment, they're going to want to pull your credit as well. So it's so important to have your credit as high as possible. This is sort of this graph here is a rough indication as to how they grade you. Obviously, 750 to 850 is going to get you the best pricing when it comes to buying a house and getting credit card, when you do a home equity line, any of those things. 700 to 750 is still a good score, but you're not going to get as good a pricing. And if you start to get below 700, your interest rates will definitely be higher. So you really want to manage that. You can go once a year to annualcreditreport.com and pull your credit. It is not an inquiry. And you can look at your credit report, make sure there's no errors. That's going to be really important to do. And then you have to pay an additional small amount for your scores. But it's important to get a handle on where that is. And the credit report's important again because there are errors on credit reports all the time. I've seen it so many times. So it's important that you have checked and make sure that it is clean. Okay, so how does the credit score made up? So 35% is your payment history. Amount owed is 30%. Length of history is 15%. New credit is 10, and types of credit is 10. And I'll go into all those in detail. So payment history, 35% of your score. That's the biggest piece that we have that affects your credit score. The most important thing you can do is pay your bills on time. I have seen, oh my gosh, scores because you're late on a mortgage especially, scores have dropped 50 to 100 points because of one mortgage late. So super important to make sure you are never late on your mortgage. I know it's due on the 1st and late by the 15th. Some people wait to the 13th or the 14th because they want to keep the money. I would say don't do that. Don't push your luck, because if it's just one day late, well, typically if it's just one day, like if it's the 16th of the month, that's not reported to the credit bureaus. However, you're still paying a penalty. It's a 30-day late that gets reported. So just be really cautious of not paying anything late. Credit cards on time as well, super important. They will drop quickly and they're very slow to come back up. They take a long time to come back up, but they drop like a fly. Use your cards to pay for gas or food, knowing that you're going to pay off in full. That's going to help you raise your score. That teaches your credit bureaus that you are responsible, that you can use and pay, and that you're mindful of that. So that's a great way to get your score up. Never be late, and use and pay in full. Next piece is the amount owed, 30%. So there's a thing called a utilization ratio. That basically is a fancy word for saying how much debt do you have outstanding relative to how much you have available. So let's say you've got a credit card with a $1,000 credit limit, and you start to use it and you aren't able to pay it off in full. If you start to get above 30% or so, your scores start to come down. So they like to see, the credit bureaus like to see 30% and below use on that credit card. Super important to manage that and watch that. I know in these times, especially the last year, is a little bit harder to always pay in full and keep that down. But when you can get back on track, just know that you want to stay below that 30% number. And that's 30% of your credit score. So it happens to be that same number. The next piece is our length of credit history being 15%. So oftentimes people have older credit cards and they want to close them because they don't ever use them. The problem with that is that you lose all that credit history, especially if you've got long, history on, an old Visa that you never use. That history is then all gone if you close it. So just leave it open. You can chop it up, put it in the freezer, do whatever you want with it. Don't ever use it, but just know that you want to keep it open. Sometimes parents will, to help their teens getting started with credit, add their child to the card as either an authorized user, and that helps them to, the child then gains all that credit history from the parents, which is a great way to sort of, not cheat the system, but sort of, it's a way that the child can have a jump start, if you will. Okay, so the next piece is 10% of new credit. So it's a sign to the credit bureaus if you go out and you all of a sudden open up all these credit cards thinking, well, I'm going to have more lines available, which will help my utilization ratio. But if you go out and you go and open up a bunch of credit cards, it looks like you're getting in trouble. It's a sign of, why is this person opening up all these credit cards all of a sudden? What's happening in the world? So your scores will start to come down. So don't open a bunch of credit cards thinking that you're going to increase that ratio. And when the person at the department store, because this happens all the time, you go and you say, oh, you know, or the sales person says, you know, you get 10% off or 15% off of your purchase if you open a credit card with us. Just say no, thank you. Unless you're making a very large purchase like a refrigerator or an appliance and you're going to save hundreds of dollars, then I would say it makes sense to go ahead and do that. But if it's a 10% off at a department store or a, you know, a clothing store, just say no thank you, because that they don't like those department store credit cards. And then the final piece is types of credit. The credit bureaus like to see various types of credit. So they like to see a mortgage, a car payment, maybe a student loan, and then a credit card or so. 3 to 5 credit lines are enough to get a good score. I've seen credit reports with 3 lines on it, and that's it, and their scores are in the high 700s. So don't feel like you need a lot of credit to get your credit score up. A healthy mix is best. And then again, your goal should always be to try to pay that down to 0. And I know it's, you know, a little bit more difficult lately with what's going on, but if you can, you know, pay that down to 0. So that kind of wraps up the credit piece, and we're going to bring on Stu.
Okay, thanks, Patty. There are some good hints in there. I love that. All right, so now we get to talk about investing. Investing, to me, that's absolutely the name of the game. Why? Because money's a game. And if we can look at it that way just a little bit, we're going to understand that in order to win this particular game, the money game, we're going to need to know the rules. So I'm going to start sharing a few rules with you. The first one happens to be the main rule of money, and it's called the Rule of 72. I don't know how many of you know this and how many of you don't. If you know it, it's going to be a great review. If you don't know it, welcome to my world. The first time I ever sat down with anyone, I had never heard of this before, and if someone would have told it to me way back when, could have been in a completely different place halfway through my life. So the Rule of 72 is sometimes also called the banker's rule, and you're going to see why that's the case. It says very simply that if you take the number 72 and you divide it by whatever interest rate you're getting, that's going to tell you approximately how many years it'll take that money to double. So let me give you an example here. You'll see that I gave all of you $10,000 on my little chart right there. So you can thank me later for that. And let's just say that we decided we were going to go down to a bank because we know our money's going to be safe in the bank. And this particular bank was going to give us a great 3% rate of return. Of course, I don't know where you can get 3% anymore, but we're just going to say 72 divided by 3 is 24. Which means that $10,000 doubles in 24 years. Now, for some of us here, don't add it onto your age. It gets really, really scary. For the younger folks, go ahead and add it on. All right, in 24 years, we've got 20,000. In another 24 years, we would have $40,000. Well, what if we could have gotten a 6% rate of return? Well, then we would have had $120,000. But if we could get a 12% rate of return, that would double every 6 years, and we would end up with over $2 million. Now, 12% is probably a little hefty right now, but even at a 9% rate of return, that's well over $1 million. Now, here's the challenge. We put our money in the bank. They gave us that $40,000, but they didn't keep it there. They didn't tie a little bow around it and put it in a safe somewhere. They took our money, they went out and they invested it in the American economy, made back that 12% rate of return, or if they didn't do that, by the way, they loaned it to somebody and they probably got a 20% rate of return. But let's just say the 12%. They make the $2.5 million, they give us back the $40,000, or maybe they even gave us back the $120,000. Do they care? Well, not so much. They just kept over $2 million, which could have been our money if we would have understood the rules of the game. But we didn't, because nobody ever taught it to us. This should be taught to us in 3rd grade, and 5th grade, and 7th grade, and 9th grade, and all through high school, in college. over and over and over again so we understand what is going on out there. But how do we fix it? Where do we go next? Well, we first have to start with not being a loaner. We've got to become our own owner. In other words, let's not put money for long-term savings, and you heard me on that one correctly. I said long-term savings because if it's for an emergency fund or short-term savings, the bank is the correct place for it. But for long-term savings, what happens if we bypass the bank, go directly into the global economy, which is where the bank went with our money to begin with, and now we get back that 9%, 12%, whatever the return is. We get it instead of the bank. Because the reason the bank got it to begin with is that they only have to give back the money to the direct investor. And when we went through the bank was the direct investor. So they got the bulk, gave us what they wanted. We bypass them, go straight to the global economy, we get back the rate of return. All right. So how do we do this? Well, enter mutual funds. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of mutual funds before. Some of you may or may not know what they are. They're used all the time in our 401ks for those of you that have that. A lot of times if you have individual IRAs or Roth IRAs, you're probably using them in there. Not everybody though. So what is a mutual fund? It's literally a lot of people, and you'll see that on the outsides of the slide, pooling together little bits of money, allowing them as a unit, as a group of people to hire a professional money manager whose job and expertise it is to know how to invest it. And it's invested in some of the best companies around. I mean, if I asked you, would you like to own a little bit of oh, I don't know. Well, I want to say Wells Fargo, but Wells Fargo had some problems last year, so maybe I don't want to say that. But maybe I'll just go to Amazon and Best Buy and how about Costco and Apple, and we can go on and on and on. There's some really good companies out there. If you could own just a piece of each one of those, how exciting could that be? And a mutual fund is made up, a growth one is made up of anywhere from 100 to 300 different companies. So they become fairly safe. And that's the main thing right there. Professional money manager, fairly safe, long history. They've been around since 1924. That's almost 100 years. It's getting up there right now. And this is why banks and insurance companies and our retirement assets are usually in some kind of mutual funds. All right. So we know where to put it now. This is another really important rule of investing, and that is invest with your head, not with your heart. We've got to be aware of our emotions. We know that the market goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And when it's up, we get so excited about it. And when people are investing, especially those who invest maybe not all the time, but they find out the next best stock or something, as soon as it starts going up and it gets up to a certain point, they go, I've got to have a piece of that. And so they invest in it, and you're excited when it's going up. But at some point in time, that market turns around and things start going down a little bit. And you get a little concerned at the beginning, but you kind of remember something somebody said, and so you're not doing anything about it. But as it goes down, 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 our emotions jump right back in, and we go, I got to get out. And so we jump out of the market. And then, of course, it starts going back in. And as it goes up, we wait to a certain point and we start getting back in. Well, this is an interesting kind of scenario because this is what happens when we're dealing with money. But let's put it back over to a different scenario altogether. Let's say all of us are going shopping and we need to buy some shoes. And we look at the regular rack, the regular retail rack, but we notice that almost the same pair of shoes is over there on the sale rack. Do we buy it at regular price over on the one rack, or do we go over to the sale rack and we buy that one? Well, of course, we buy it on sale. And if at this particular store, and this isn't usually the case, we could take those shoes back when it went up to regular price, we would have just made money on our shoes that we bought. And we would be so excited. We bought them on sale and we sold them when it was at regular price. Now let's go back to our money scenario. Is that what we did on this up and down roller coaster? Nope. We did exactly the opposite. We bought it when it was doing well, and we sold it when it was doing poorly. And that's not what we want to do. We want to buy when it's down and sell when it's up. Now, the challenge is we don't know when that's happening. So it becomes really important that we put little bits of money in over time. And that's going to balance things out just a little bit. That's called dollar cost averaging. So this becomes a real important thing when we're talking about investing. But there's one more thing that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. And so lastly, it is have a plan and a person. Why? Because when emotions kick in, that person can be so helpful to you. That plan that you came up with, or maybe you came up with a person, can be so helpful because you can stick to the plan. So having a plan and a person is going to help point you in the right direction and keep you on that path. And you're welcome to get a hold of me, and of course get a hold of Patty. And I'm going to have her come back in because right now we're going to answer some questions for you, and I know there have been some. And I want to thank you for having us and allowing us to participate in this.
Yeah, those were great. You know, I think you drove home so many great points, Sue, and that is the importance of the dollar cost averaging, which is really huge, tapping into the market slowly, not selling when it's low and buying when it's high, because those shoes on sale, that's a great example. It's, you know, volatility is your friend. The stock market is going to be volatile. Just know that when you go into it, that's just the name of the game. But it is, like Sue said, a long-term plan. 5 years or longer is just, don't look at the money, just ignore that it's there. Important to watch it and manage it, but when you see it go down, don't let your emotions get the best of you. And it's so important to, just manage that. So, questions?
How do I manage my money when you're trying to be in a budget and have children?
Okay, so the question was, did everyone hear the question first of all? They could all hear it. Okay.
Okay, great. You want to fill that one?
Yeah, we can go ahead and start, and then I'll.
Okay, so managing, and I'm a single mom, and I have been for a while, so I understand that trying to make a living on an income and having kids and balancing all the balls in the air, it's not an easy thing. And my suggestion is, break it down in small pieces. I would say get a very good handle on what's going out. Take a look, and I hate the word budget because it sounds like a diet. It's so, constricting, but you really need to get an idea of what's going out and where you can possibly, not shave, but watch what's happening with regards to the money that's going out. Get a spending tracker in place. We have one at Advanced Wealth. If you want, we're happy to get that for you. But get a handle on what's going out. At the end of the day, is cash flow. What's coming in versus what's going out. So either you've got to find a way to, either make more, buy a new job, or you need to cut back.
Yeah, so basically, and just to summarize what Patty said real fast there, it literally is having a plan. Getting together and figuring out how we're going to do this. How are we going to get out of debt? How are we going to do that budget? And by the way, Patty, this is going to be interesting for you. Budget to me is not a 4-letter word. Budget to me means that we are literally on top of our money. It's us telling our money what we want to do every month. And as soon as I changed the way I looked at it that way, it was so much easier to do a budget. Because it's like, oh, I have this much money. Okay, I want it to go here and here and here and here and here. Yeah. So now it was a lot easier to do. So again, I think both of us have those budget planning things. So just get a hold of one of us. Go ahead.
All right, second question. Does debt expire? What happens if you owe something from a few years ago?
A few years ago isn't going to be long enough for it to expire. It's going to stay on your credit report. 7 to 10 years. I've heard 10 lately. I don't know if it's any longer than that. Have you heard?
Yeah, it's usually 10 years.
Yep.
It, depends on if it goes to collection or,
Exactly.
what, if it's a mortgage or a credit card or medical, it'll damage your score for many, many years. So, yeah, don't focus on trying to let it expire, focus on getting rid of it. And oftentimes you can call the credit card company or the collection agency and negotiate literally pennies on the dollar of what you owe. And then you get a collection or what's called a deletion letter from them. You take that letter to the credit bureaus, and then it'll be removed from your credit report.
All right. Here we have a question from online. Obtaining advice is not free. How does one look for a planner, and how much is the fee that should be paid? A percent of the investment or a flat rate?
Okay, so there's a couple different things here, and Patty and I are probably going to have a slightly different answer for that. My firm does do strategic plans for free. And the reason why is because a lot of times, or most of the time, we work with Middle America. And the truth is when you're having to pay for it, it's hard to start saving money. So we've decided to do that, to actually do a game plan. What was the second part of that question?
Do you pay a percentage of the investment or a flat rate?
Okay, so there's different ways to do that. There is flat rates. There are sometimes percentages of the investment. I don't think one or the other is right or wrong. I think it depends on what you're getting and why you're doing it. I think the ones that you may want to stay away from a lot of times is where you're paying a flat rate and a percentage. That becomes somewhat of a challenge because it's more money going out. But Patty, you wanna...
Yeah, Sue pretty much covered it. Firms are just various. Some charge purely what they manage. It's called AUM, asset under management, and it's a percentage of that. Some charge the flat fee. Every firm is different. I think it's more important for you to find someone that you resonate with, that listens to you, that that you trust and has your back. That's going to be more important, really, to find that person than try to get the cheapest situation. You can go to a Vanguard or Fidelity. You won't get the advice, but you can invest in a mutual fund, but you won't get the advice that you need. And so it just depends on what your needs are and what you're looking for.
All right, next question. I have a Roth IRA and the limit is $6,500 per year. I recently started a new job with 401k benefits. I signed up for a Roth 401k. Is the limit the same? Can I still invest in my personal Roth IRA and in my Roth 401k at the same time? And what are my limits?
Okay, so the limit on your 401k, no, it is not the same, by the way. Roth 401k, it's $19,500. Unless you're over 50, it's another $6,500 on top of that. So yeah, a lot more can go into a Roth IRA than an individual Roth IRA. Yeah. That was the first part. What was the next part?
They want to know if they can invest
Oh,
both
yes.
at the same.
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. You can do both. There was a time when it wasn't necessarily the case, but that's not true. You can. Yeah.
And Roth is a beautiful thing. If you're over 50
wonderful.
and you do an individual Roth outside your work, you can do what's called a catch-up, and it's 7,000. Yeah, 7,000. So it's a beautiful vehicle. So kudos to you for doing the Roth.
Yep.
All right. Is there a best way to invest your money if or when comparing stocks, Forex, or Bitcoin?
Okay. I saw this one the other day. Okay, so number one, first of all, the best thing I can tell you on this is you need to have a person to talk to on something like this. You've got stocks. Individual stocks can be risky or not as risky depending on where you're investing. Forex, that's the foreign exchange. This is currencies. Currencies are real volatile. You've got to know what you're doing on there. Bitcoin, that's a commodity still. It's not cash, but it's cash. It's not considered an investment per se at this point in time still. So, and of course, it's going up and down and all over the place too. So I think two things on here. Number one, someone to talk to makes a lot of sense. A plan is a strategic plan on this one. a must. And the reason why is because if you're taking retirement dollars and investing in some of this, it may not be the right place. If you're taking money that you can play with afterwards and you're not as concerned about, go for it. So
Yeah,
that makes sense.
that's exactly what I would say. Just make sure that you're not investing in these things with your retirement funds. Have that foundation, have that play, and be willing to know that if you're going to buy Bitcoin or tap into Forex or do some of those speculative investing, that you know in your mind that you can possibly lose it and be okay with that. And know that if you do lose it, it's not going to affect your overall financial plan. If it does, then you shouldn't be investing in those things. It's got to be money that you're willing to lose.
All right, I have another one. I have read that parents can open up a 401k account for their children. And I'm thinking of doing this. I'm thinking of doing this in the future. Any tips on how to proceed with that?
Do they have a business? The 401k is through a business. Is the parent?
Generally have to be 21, depends on how it's defined.
Yeah.
Probably, okay, 401k, can they have an IRA? Yes. And usually that's what's open when somebody owns a business to their child, and when they're participating, is they usually go ahead and max out one of the IRAs, because the child now has what would be conceived as earned income. So can you do that? A minor IRA? Yes, absolutely. Or a minor Roth IRA? Yes.
If they have earned income.
If they have earned income.
Yeah.
You can only invest the amount that is up to your earned income. So the limit is $6,500, but if the child is if you're only giving to the IRS that they are making $2,000 a year, then $2,000 is the limit. You can't go above it. Because it's not earned anymore.
It's just, she wants to know about a personal IRA.
So yes, yeah, like what Sue just said, you can up to what that child is making. I would strongly suggest a Roth over a traditional IRA.
Absolutely.
The Roth is a beautiful thing because all that growth over the 30, 40, 50 years, however old they are, that's all tax-free. All that accumulation, all that compounding, and when they pull it out, it's tax-free, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah. So,
awesome.
Yeah, we're coming up on our 11:30 and we have no more questions.
Turn on the volume, maybe you can hear them.
Okay, we'll open this up for anything.
I did find another question.
Phyllis, you found one, Melissa?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm a very young 25 years old single mother. Just got her first full-time job a couple of months ago. She wants to start investing but has no idea where to start. Can you recommend a company or perhaps any financial advisors that I can talk to help me get started and learn a budget?
Take down our phone numbers. Yeah, absolutely. And congratulations, first of all, starting your first job and starting to save for the future this early. It's the best thing that you could do. You will be so much better off. The clients that I have that started at 24 or 25 years old, by the time they're 35 and 40, I've got a couple of those in there, are so well on the way to being able to not even have to worry about anything. It's amazing. So congratulations. But yeah, take down our phone numbers. We'll be glad to help.
And it's amazing what little, even if you save little monies every month, the power of compounding is amazing. And like Sue was sharing earlier, the rule of 72 with the percentages, if you start investing that, the compounding of that is just, it's great. And then as you get more income and you can save a little bit more, I would suggest you do it automatically. I would say automatically pay yourself first every month, take it from your checking account into whatever fund you do. I mean, even if it's $30 a month, whatever that number is, just do it automatically, because at the end of the month, there's always something to put money, there's always some bills. So pay yourself first.
Yep.
And this is going back to the question about the Roth IRA. If the child works elsewhere and has earned income, can I still put money away for the children since I know they are not investing in a Roth IRA for children or teenagers?
Okay. So if the child is the one that's opening that up, it doesn't have to come from they have to have earned income. the money in their account can be invested up to that amount, up to the amount of the earned income. So can you open up a Roth IRA with them? Yes, it's actually theirs. So it's done under their name. It's not you actually doing it for them. It actually, they ultimately own that. So, okay.
I hope that answers that question.
I hope it does too. Okay, Phyllis, I think we
Yes.
can hand it back over to you now.
Okay, so I want to just give an applause to our speakers, Sue and Patty. Wasn't this a great workshop? So we want to thank you, Patty and Sue, for providing all this valuable information and answering our questions about how to be the boss of our money as we move forward with our life and during this pandemic. Thank you all for attending. Our next workshop, scheduled for February the 27th, you have a business idea. Now what? Idea creation. Turn your passion or vision into action, which will be presented by the Small Business Development Center, Los Angeles Network representatives, Alex Hollywood, who is the business advisor, and Israel Cerna. We would like for everyone to plan on attending that. And now in our chat, there is a link for an anonymous evaluation survey of the workshop. We ask you to take a few minutes to complete this. This information is very important to us as it lets us know how the workshop was relevant and helpful to you. We also ask for future workshop topics that are of interest to you. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much.